Have you ever realized that the people you trust the most are hiding something that could change your life forever? I never thought it could happen to me. I always believed my family was honest, that we had each other's backs. But that Thanksgiving, everything I thought I knew about my life, about my parents, about my grandpa, shattered in a single moment. I remember walking into the dining room that evening, the smell of roasted turkey and pumpkin pie filling the air, the laughter of relatives echoing around me. I was excited. It was my first Thanksgiving home after finishing college, and I thought maybe, just maybe, things were finally normal. My parents greeted me with hugs, a little forced, but warm enough. My younger cousins ran around, shrieking with excitement, and for a moment it felt like home. Then Grandpa smiled. That smile. You know, the one that makes you feel like he knows everything and you know nothing. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes on me, and said casually, "Glad you're enjoying the college fund." I froze, I blinked. I laughed nervously, thinking it was a joke. "What college fund?" I asked, trying to mask the panic creeping into my chest. Grandpa didn't smile. He didn't even blink. He just looked at me, cold and steady, like a man holding a secret he had no intention of sharing easily. "The one you've been spending all these years," he said. My heart stopped. My parents stiffened. The room seemed to grow heavier, quieter, every sound amplified. My mom's fork clinked against her plate. My dad's jaw tightened. I could feel their eyes on me, but I couldn't look away from Grandpa. "I don't understand," I whispered. He leaned forward slightly, resting his hand on the table. "Evelyn, the money your parents told you didn't exist. The fund your father and mother promised was for emergencies. It was real. All of it. Millions. Millions you've never touched, never known about." I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath me. Every late night working 2 jobs, every scholarship application, every sacrifice I had made to support my family suddenly seemed meaningless in a way that made my chest ache. Why didn't anyone tell me?" I managed to get out, my voice shaking. My father cleared his throat. "It was complicated," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. My mother tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled back. I wanted nothing from them. Not comfort. Not explanations. I wanted answers. Grandpa watched silently, then said, "Sometimes the hardest lessons are the ones you learn from those closest to you. Your parents made choices they thought were right. And maybe they were, in their minds. But you've been kept in the dark." I couldn't speak. I wanted to scream, to cry, to shake them both until they admitted every lie. My mind was spinning. The anger, the betrayal, the disbelief, it all mixed into this storm that I could barely control. My cousins were chattering about football, oblivious to the tension, and that just made it worse. The contrast between their laughter and my internal chaos was unbearable. My mom finally spoke. "Evelyn, we only wanted to protect you." "Protect me?" I wanted to laugh in disbelief. "Protect me from what? From knowing the truth? From realizing you were lying all these years while I worked my hands to the bone?" "Protect me?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You stole my life, my choices, my freedom to make mistakes on my own terms. You lied about money I could have had, about opportunities you could have given me, about everything." Grandpa raised a hand, not to stop me, but almost to encourage me to keep speaking. "Go on," he said. "Say what you feel. You have every right to." I could feel the tears burning behind my eyes, my hands trembling. I wanted to make them understand, to make them feel even a fraction of what I had felt all these years. The exhaustion, the anxiety, the fear that we didn't have enough, the sense of inadequacy that had haunted me in every relationship, every job, every decision. I took a deep breath. Do you know how many nights I stayed awake, worrying about rent, tuition, groceries, bills? How many times I worked double shifts just to keep things afloat because I believed you were struggling too? My dad's face tightened. My mom's lips pressed into a thin line. I could see it now, and the guilt, the shame, the fear that maybe, just maybe, they had underestimated me. And all this time you had it? All the money, all the security I begged for, all the resources I dreamed of? You had it and hid it from me? Grandpa's eyes softened slightly, just a hint, like he understood the magnitude of what I was feeling. "Yes," he said. "They had it. They hid it. But it is yours now. Every cent." The room was silent again. I didn't know whether to cry, laugh, or scream. The reality of the situation was almost surreal. My parents looked at me, and in that moment, I saw everything I had missed. The contempt hidden behind polite smiles. The quiet judgment, the constant comparison to my cousins, to my sister, to everyone else. And then I realized this wasn't just about money. This was about control. About power. About keeping me small, keeping me dependent, keeping me in a cage while they decided what was best for me. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor, loud in the quiet room. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me? The years of self-doubt, the stress, the fear, all of it because you wanted to play puppet master in my life?" My mom opened her mouth, then closed it. My dad's hands shook slightly. Even Grandpa looked uncomfortable now, though he didn't move. I worked for this money, I continued, voice rising but steady. And you treated me like I didn't matter. Like my dreams were small, like I was nothing. And now you expect me to, what, smile and thank you? For what, deception? I could see the panic in my parents' eyes. A stark contrast to their usual composure. The facade was crumbling, and it was beautiful in a terrifying way. I had never felt more alive, more powerful, more free. Grandpa leaned back, watching quietly. You have every right to be angry, Evelyn. But remember this. The truth has a way of coming out. And when it does, you either rise above it or it consumes you. I stared at him, feeling the weight of his words, knowing he was right. This moment was a turning point. I could continue to be angry, to feel betrayed, to let the hurt define me. Or I could take what was rightfully mine and build my life without limits. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. My parents barely touched their food. My cousins chattered around me, oblivious, and Grandpa just observed with that inscrutable smile. But inside, I was making plans. Plans for every moment they had doubted me. Every opportunity they had withheld. Every slight, every insult. I would rise. Not just with money, but with power, with confidence, with the quiet satisfaction of proving them wrong. That night, I went to my room and sat on my bed, the weight of the revelation pressing down on me. I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every conversation, every glance, every calculated decision my parents had made. And as the hours passed, clarity came. I didn't just want to reclaim my trust fund. I wanted to reclaim my life. The first step was understanding the full scope. I started digging, through bank statements, legal papers, old letters, anything that could show me the truth of what had been done behind my back. It was worse than I imagined. The depth of the deception, the extent to which my parents had hidden everything, left me both furious and determined. I realized I had two choices. I could confront them directly and risk everything in a volatile emotional showdown, or I could take the silent route, research, plan, and prepare until I had all the leverage I needed to turn the tables completely. I chose the latter. Weeks passed. I became almost obsessive. I learned about investments, legal loopholes, and the ways trusts could be manipulated. I found evidence of money transfers, secret accounts, and even instances where my parents had used my identity to benefit themselves without my knowledge. Every discovery was like fuel to a fire that had been smoldering inside me for years. And then the moment came. A family meeting, casual in appearance, but carefully orchestrated by me. I had printed documents, lined up lawyers, and even prepared a small but significant demonstration of the truth. I knew the shock would be immense, the humiliation undeniable. When the meeting started, my parents tried to maintain their composure. But I could see it slipping. I calmly presented everything, the accounts, the transfers, the lies. Every time they tried to interject, I held up a hand. Please, let me finish. You will have plenty of time to explain yourselves after you understand the full picture. By the time I finished, my parents were pale, shaken. My grandparents looked at me with pride, but also a little fear. The power dynamics had shifted completely. I had taken control, not with anger, not with shouting, but with knowledge and patience. That night, I went to bed with a sense of satisfaction that I had never known. Not revenge in the petty sense, but justice, recognition, power reclaimed. I knew this was just the beginning. My life, my choices, my dreams, everything had been waiting for this moment. And I would never let anyone take it from me again. After that family meeting, I felt like I had stepped out of a fog I had been trapped in my entire life. For the first time, I could breathe without the weight of lies pressing down on me. I had seen my parents' faces, the shock, the fear, the desperation to justify years of deception. It was intoxicating, but I knew I had to stay focused. This was not just about emotion anymore. It was about strategy, about reclaiming every piece of my life that had been stolen. I started with the trust fund. I had spoken to the lawyers, prepared all the documents, and verified every transaction. The fund was mine, no question about it. I could finally access it, control it, and use it to build the life I deserved. I remember logging into the account for the first time. Seeing that number, the reality of the millions staring back at me, it was almost surreal. I laughed aloud, a mix of relief and triumph, knowing that all the years of sacrifice had finally led to this moment. But reclaiming the money was only part of it. I wanted accountability. I wanted my parents to understand the consequences of their actions, not just feel embarrassed. I planned carefully. I reached out to my extended family, those who had always been neutral, maybe even sympathetic to my parents' control. I invited them over, but I made sure the environment was controlled, just like I had done at the meeting. When they arrived, I kept things calm, almost casual, until the right moment. I started sharing stories, small truths at first, anecdotes about my hard work, the nights I had stayed awake worrying, the sacrifices no one noticed. I could see some of my relatives nodding, others looking uncomfortable. Then I slowly revealed the evidence, The accounts, the transfers, the lies. Every face in the room changed. Gasps, wide eyes, whispers. Some relatives tried to defend my parents, but the documentation was undeniable. I watched my parents squirm, their carefully constructed world crumbling. My mother's eyes filled with tears. But they weren't the right kind. They were panicked, pleading. My father's jaw was set, but I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he avoided eye contact. It was beautiful in a way, not because I enjoyed their suffering, but because the truth was finally out, and justice was in my hands. From there, I took the next step. I needed independence, a complete separation from the control they had always tried to exert. I found a small penthouse in the city, something modest but comfortable, a space that was entirely mine. I moved in quietly, letting them assume I would be at home, available, still under their thumb. Meanwhile, I began making decisions, building investments, and creating opportunities that they had never allowed me to pursue. The real shift came when I confronted my sister. She had always benefited from my labor, from my support, without understanding the effort behind it. I arranged a lunch under the guise of reconciliation. She arrived, confident, smug even, expecting me to apologize for the tension at the family meeting. Instead, I laid out everything, the truth about the trust fund, the years I had worked while they lived comfortably off my efforts, the sacrifices she had never recognized. She froze. I could see it in her eyes. For the first time, she realized that the life she thought was hers had been built on the back of my sacrifices. She tried to argue, to deflect, but I calmly dismantled every excuse, every lie. By the end of lunch, she left in silence, and I felt a sense of liberation. Not revenge in the cruel sense, but in the sense of reclaiming my power. Next, I turned my attention to my parents' manipulation of our public image. For years, they had controlled what our extended family and community thought about me, casting me as irresponsible, dependent, or incapable. I began to document everything: emails, messages, financial records, photographs. I created a timeline of deception, a narrative of the years they had tried to keep me small. I reached out to a family lawyer to ensure everything was legally sound. Then I sent a detailed letter to relatives, outlining the facts and offering the truth in a way that could not be denied. I didn't write it angrily. It was factual, concise, and powerful. The response was immediate. Relatives who had ignored my struggles, or sided with my parents now, reached out with apologies, expressions of disbelief, and in some cases, support. The tide had turned. By the time I had finished, I realized that the power dynamics in my family had shifted completely. I was no longer the quiet, obedient daughter. I was a woman with control over her own life, unafraid to assert boundaries, unafraid to demand respect. My parents were forced to reckon with their choices, and for the first time, they couldn't manipulate me. Then came the moment of ultimate reckoning. My father, in a rare show of vulnerability, tried to justify his actions, claiming he had wanted to protect me from mistakes, from risk. I listened patiently, then said exactly what I had rehearsed. You protected me from what? From truth? From my own life? Every choice I made, every mistake, I could have learned from it. But you kept me blind, and that was not protection. That was control. And control is not love. He had no words. My mother tried to interject, but I raised a hand, silencing her. I didn't want apologies. I wanted acknowledgement. And I got it. Not in their words, but in their silence. In the way their faces dropped. The way they could no longer meet my eyes. I began to focus on my life fully. I invested, started a business, traveled. I built relationships on my own terms, and for the first time, I felt truly free. The trust fund gave me resources, but the knowledge and control I had gained were worth far more. I was no longer defined by their lies, their judgments, or their manipulations. Months later, I attended a family gathering, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to show them that I had moved beyond their influence. I arrived confidently, dressed as I pleased, radiating the independence and strength I had fought so hard to claim. My parents' faces registered shock, disbelief, and perhaps a little fear. I smiled calmly, knowing they had underestimated me for the last time. I didn't gloat. I didn't flaunt the money or the success. I simply existed, and my presence alone was the statement. The subtle power, the quiet triumph, was far more satisfying than any revenge could have been. I realized that the ultimate victory was not punishment or humiliation, but the reclamation of my life. My parents could continue to exist in the shadows of their mistakes, but I had stepped into the light, unafraid, unchained, unstoppable. Years later, I look back on that night, on the Thanksgiving dinner, and I understand something profound. Betrayal is painful, yes, but it can also be transformative. The people who try to limit you, who hide the truth, who manipulate and control, they do not have the final say. You do. Every choice, every step, every decision to rise above is yours. I have built a life filled with honesty, trust, and self-respect. I am no longer a passive participant in my own story. I have taken the lessons of betrayal and transformed them into power, independence, and a deep, unshakable understanding of my worth. My parents? They learned their lesson the hard way. They saw what they had done, what they had lost, and they could not change it. And that, more than any confrontation or argument, was the quiet, haunting victory I had sought. I am Evelyn Hart, and this is my life, reclaimed, unshackled, and defined not by the lies of others, but by the choices I made to rise above them. And every time I remember that night, the smile my grandfather gave me, the look on my parents' faces, I know this. Underestimating me was their biggest mistake.